Welcome back to a brand new edition of the BWI Daily Recruiting Show. I'm Greg Pickel. Ryan Snyder, our recruiting insider, recruiting expert at Blue White Illustrated and On3, joins us for another week of recruiting talk. Ryan, it's April 5th. This is not necessarily always commitment season, but you can never rule one out in the crazy world that is recruiting. We're going to cover that and what it means for Penn State, get into the transfer portal as we tend to do here on the show, and also get some final thoughts on the weekend visitors that were and where things stand with them. So let's start with the commitment. Actually, let's pull an audible, get your final thoughts on the NCAA college basketball championships. I know you had Kansas in a good spot until they weren't in a good spot, but college basketball is over, and now we are officially in the long grind for college athletics to really hit the mainstream again when football starts in the fall.
Yeah, I hope my wife doesn't watch this. I had Kansas minus 3.5 last night, guys. So I don't know if anybody knows how the spread works and watched that guy go out of bounds, but that one hurt. So enough gambling talk. But yeah, it was a fun tournament though, right?
Yep.
UNC made a great run, and it was good. I mean, Kansas, I thought they certainly deserved it, and especially like when the brackets came out and you saw their region, like they definitely had the easiest run. I did have Kansas in my bracket, but it didn't matter because everything else was destroyed. But always a fun tournament. That game was incredible last night. I mean that it stinks losing your play, right? But that was a fun game to stay up for. No more 9:20 tip-offs. I know that's not going to change. They've done that for what seems like 4 or 5 years now, but 9:20 tip-offs are miserable on the East Coast. But congrats to Kansas. And should I call them the Kansas City Jayhawks? Did you see?
I did see that. Yes,
Emirates. Yeah, the Kansas City Jayhawks. That was good. But it's spring baseball season, MLB for us up here in the Northeast more than college ball. But excited to watch the Phillies and move into the summer.
Yeah, I am a big proponent of getting both the college football playoff and the NCAA basketball championship off of Monday night, but it's not going to happen. Not unless some big money TV power player comes in and says they want to do it. So we'll see, but I don't like our odds of it starting sooner or on a different day.
One of us are going to the Masters this week.
That's right. Off and running Wednesday morning. Yep. Looking forward to it. Another big – it is one of the best sporting weeks in the world, isn't it? When you come off to college basketball, you start baseball, it goes into the Masters. I mean, you got a little bit of everything no matter what sports you enjoy. So, yeah, looking forward to that. Looking forward to reading.
Which round are you going to?
Round one Friday? On Thursday. Yep, Thursday.
Round one Thursday. Okay.
Yep.
Well, everybody look for Greg to be one of the is it patrons? Is that what they call them?
And
get your pimento cheese sandwich. Enjoy it, man. Yeah. I'm jealous.
Yep. All the other great things you can find to do in Augusta. So, yeah, looking forward to that. Looking forward to seeing what James Franklin and Manny Diaz have to say Wednesday night. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you have to say about this new Penn State commitment, UNT, Frank, who, of course, is doing the great production work for us today. Discussed this a little bit on the BWI Daily Edition on Monday, but Penn State does have a new commitment, and it came over the weekend with Andrew Rappleyea. I think I got that right this time.
You did.
He committed to Penn State, flipped from Michigan. Ryan, one that anyone who's been following us over at Blue White Illustrated, and I think we've probably brought it up here on the recruiting show as well, knows is a player that Penn State was hard after, and they didn't get his commitment the first time around because of the way things played out with their class then. Well, things are playing out differently with the class now, and they were able to land him. And, I think for, a whole bunch of different reasons, both some of the ones he discussed with you and kind of where Penn State is at a position point right now at tight end, it made all the sense in the world for this commitment to finally take place and for Penn State to be in a position to accept it.
It's not often that a school is able to land pretty much all their top guys at one position. And that's really kind of how this all played out. Of course, Matthias Barnwell was a tight end at one point. He's going to switch to defensive tackle. Penn State always kind of looked him as we call it like a jumbo athlete just because he's obviously because of his size. I think when people hear athlete, they think of smaller, shiftier guys. So I call them jumbo athletes. But obviously getting him and Joey Schlaffer, they were always both very high on the board. And then you had Rappleyea and Neo Avery, of course. And Penn State held commitments from all four of them at one point. And that pretty much was their tight end board between those four. And of course, that's why Rappleyea really wasn't able to kind of commit on the timeline that he was originally planning on because Neo Avery committed on New Year's Eve. I said Christmas Eve yesterday on the podcast, Steve Frank. I realized that it was a New Year's Eve for
We
Avery.
know you're
But
still alive
of
because
course,
it wasn't on Christmas Eve. I don't know if you would have survived working Christmas Eve on that commitment. So that was the
yeah.
dead
Well, Mitchell
giveaway.
Tinsley, we had Mitchell Tinsley on
We
Christmas
did
Eve.
have a
So
little bit of
imagine
fun
if it
with
would have
Mitchell
been both.
Tinsley. I forgot about that. Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, of course, Avery has since decommitted, and this wasn't really about Avery decommitting. This was more so about Penn State at the time. We thought convinced Avery to focus on defensive end, and then of course Matthias, making the transition to defensive tackle, and having all four of them on board and kind of clearing up space for tight end is really kind of where this ball got rolling. I mean, he told me with Jay Harbaugh switching from tight end to safeties coach, that's really where Penn State got the door open, because he was trying to not talk to Penn State. Like, obviously he wanted to come to Penn State. He kind of got shut out, really, which was unfortunate. It's just how it works, right? But after Jay Harbaugh makes that switch, he kind of starts talking to Ty Howel a little bit. They make it clear that they have space now, and that's how it all played out. So can't be easy decommitting from a school like Michigan, but this is where he wanted to go from the get-go, and Penn State's happy to have him.
Yeah, and it worked out for Penn State. You mentioned the changes on the Michigan side of things that really kind of spun this back around. And then Penn State, of course, had changes with Neo Avery. So all told, I think probably best case for both sides. Let me just ask you this before we move on to some other topics, Ryan. Do you think this is going to be a trend now where guys who are listed as a tight end as sophomores or, early in their junior year or whatever it might be, that we're going to see more guys like a Matthias Barnwell keep growing, or like a Neo Avery flip to defense? Is this just a rare occurrence in this cycle, or is this something that, just out of curiosity, if Penn State gets a 25 tight end commit or a 26 tight end commit, I think it's probably good to be aware of the fact that these guys are still growing no matter what position they commit at. But I think when you're a tight end, you certainly have the body size in all likelihood to grow into something different by the time you actually get to campus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we definitely see a lot of guys who could be offensive linemen, right? But they want to hold on to tight end. Like, you just were with me at the Under Armour camp. I mean, how many tight ends there were we sitting there like, yeah, you're a tackle.
Right.
It's just that's so many athletes, man. They just kind of outgrow, the skill positions, and they hold on to it as long as they possibly can. So we do see that a lot at tight end. But as far as Penn State, we haven't really seen that too much with Penn State in the past, right? I mean, Pat was clearly a tight end. Gesicki was clearly a tight end, and you could say that about the guys currently on the roster and so many before. But tight end, it's definitely one of those positions where it's just kind of, you were an athlete your whole life, and you're just kind of outgrowing it, but you can't lose the luster of having the ball in your hand.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I know a lot of those guys, like you mentioned, will fight and claw and scrape as long as humanly possible to stay at one of those spots. But a lot of instances, they're just not going to be able to do so from a physical perspective. One final note here, Ryan, Neo Avery tweeting out not too long ago as we started recording this, he's going to visit Ole Miss this weekend. We've talked in the past about Penn State is not out of this by any stretch of the imagination, but certainly I think the way his recruiting outlook will shift is going to happen during the next few weeks and or months here as he really gets out and starts to explore some other campuses, especially ones in the South.
Yeah, I believe I saw some talk that he might go to Kentucky as well. I think I read a story there somewhere. I hope I'm not mixing him up, but I thought I saw something about him visiting Kentucky. Look, it's just the numbers for me. I just look back on since James Franklin has started here until now. I don't have the exact numbers on me, but you got Micah Parsons recommitting and Matthias Barnwell recommitting. And aside from that, not a single decommitment has then ended up signing with Penn State. So What are the numbers, man? I think it's less than 10%. I'm pretty sure they've had like 50 or maybe even up towards 60. I think that's around the range that they've had since Franklin's decommitted. And of course, those numbers really aren't, they're kind of average from what I've seen. I haven't, looked back on every Division I school, but 50, 60, that's about right over a 8 or 9 year span compared to other schools, of course. But just the numbers don't suggest it's likely. And he clearly wants to be recruited. And, usually when guys commit and then, open things back up, it's not like they recommit anytime soon. So this should last for a while.
Yeah, no doubt. I guess the one thing I would say, if you're looking to spin the numbers in a positive light, you could do it. And note that the only two guys who did decommit and then recommit to Penn State were from that 300-mile radius that they find so important around
True.
State College. When you're, and look, I don't think he ends up at Maryland or Rutgers. So, I mean, I haven't done the math here yet, but I would assume that of the schools he's going to really focus in on here, Penn State might be the closest one for him to get to by car. You can correct me on that if I'm wrong, but that was sort of the issue. The thing that went Penn State's way with Parsons and with Barnwell to some extent is that they could easily get back to campus. So if you're looking for something positive, it's not like this is a Florida kid backing off his pledge and is never going to pay his own money to get on a plane to come to State College again or something like that. So we'll see. But by and large, though, you're right. Very rare for a decommitment, recommitment to happen. And so we'll see how this shakes out with Penn State.
So to Kentucky Sports Radio, official visit to Kentucky June 17th is what I saw with Avery. So that's a little ways away, but yeah, he supposedly already has one official in. But I mean, for I could still maybe see Neo committing before his senior season, but this will definitely go into the summer. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if he came back. There's a good relationship there. He's been high on Penn State for a long time, but until those numbers start shifting, I don't know how anyone can predict that he would end up in this class.
No question about it. We're moving on the Blue White Illustrated BWI Daily Recruiting Show. Ryan Snyder dishing on all the latest Penn State recruiting news. I'm Greg Pickel. Ryan, let's get into, as we start talking about visits and top schools and things like that, while you won't see a ton of commitments in all likelihood this month, you're probably going to start to see quite a few top groups and top schools lists come out. We're getting closer and closer to that point in time as spring practice wraps up, as guys come off of visits in the spring, so on and so forth. But two guys already at that point. Two linebacker targets that Penn State's been in on for quite some time have already released their top schools. Ryan, I'll let you decide where you want to start the bidding here, but two very important defenders for Penn State has it on its short list right now.
Well, one thing I will say too is that we do see commitments in April. I did a mailbag. It was about 3 weeks ago now, and I think Penn State has had in either March or April. They've had a commitment every time, so it does fluctuate a little bit. But I wouldn't personally be surprised if we saw one or two more. Over the next whatever it is, 20 some days. But you're right. This is mainly the time when you see top lists because the majority of guys take official visits. So that's kind of what we saw. Two of those this last week with Josiah Trotter and Phil Picciotti. And because they play the same position at middle linebacker, I think we kind of have to talk about both because again, I mean, I don't see them taking more than one Mike this year. I think they will take a one middle linebacker, but it's hard for me to see both. But here's the lowdown. I mean, Josiah Trotter, he's going to be committing here in about 2 weeks. I believe he was April 15th. I want to say
15th.
Yeah,
April 15th.
So
yep.
Yeah, we know Clemson, South Carolina, Virginia Tech, and West Virginia, along with Penn State, of course, are his top five. The bad news, Penn State fans, is I've already put in a pick for West Virginia, and I think it's just kind of followed the visits. A couple things, actually. One, my most recent truly full interview with him, which was, I think, the beginning of March, when he put out his top five. He said that West Virginia was one of the schools recruiting him the hardest at the time. That kind of stood out to me. And then, two, West Virginia's the last visit he took. And he doesn't have any other visits lined up. I just that's really all I'm going with there. But it just feels to me that the Mountaineers are the team to beat. So I'll be curious to see if some of my colleagues follow me, or not really follow me, but make their own picks, of course, with West Virginia in the coming weeks here. I guess we really only have 10 days, so it would be sometime this week or next.
Right.
But I think he's headed to the Mountaineers, and it. West Virginia was one of the last schools to offer him. I believe they offered him, I want to say it was within 2022. I think it was maybe February or so. I forget exactly when, but they were one of the most recent schools to offer. So this was a quick, they really jumped into his top five pretty quickly. Excuse me. It was December 3rd. I just pulled it up there. So it was very end of 2021. But my point is a lot of these other schools were on him a lot longer. But it just feels like Neil Brown and his staff have really made a strong impression here. So we'll see. Maybe I'll be wrong with that. But when I look at the fact that was the last school he visited, then also, hey, if you just look at his Twitter feed, he's retweeting a lot of other guys that are visiting West Virginia. I mean, you pull up his Twitter feed right off the bat. You have him retweeting Cameron Calhoun, who's going on an official visit to West Virginia June 3rd to the 5th. He's retweeting James Hurd, who's his teammate, of course, at St. Joseph's Prep, who's also going on an official visit to West Virginia. So, the tea leaves are all pointing towards the Mountaineers there. But the good news then, of course, is you have Phil Picciotti. who
Right.
just put out his top 12 last week. And, Penn State's going to be a serious player there. I think he has to get back to hang out with Manny Diaz some, because it does feel to me a little like Penn State's kind of lost a little bit of its luster compared to when Brent Pry was here. I'm not saying that they were the true favorite when Brent was here, but I did feel a little bit better about where Penn State stood before that coaching change. I mean, I actually put in a recruiting prediction machine pick for Penn State before that coaching change happened, and now I'd probably would lower it substantially. I probably wouldn't even have a Penn State pick in at all right now.
Interesting.
After that, so he's taking a lot of visits though right now too. He just was. I think he's about to go to Nebraska this weekend. He just saw Oklahoma. I think Michigan and Michigan State had him at the end of March. And, of course, Phil's coming up to Penn State on April 16th, and he'll do Wisconsin on April 23rd. So those visits will say a lot. Of course, he has a top 12, but just look at it here. Michigan, Michigan State, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Penn State, and Wisconsin are the 7 schools getting him on campus. So is this a top 12 or is it a top 7? I wouldn't be surprised if he sees a few of those other schools. USC, I know, is a school that I think I could see them taking an official visit to. But I think Penn State's probably top 3 or so, but I'm not very confident in saying they're the team to beat now.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, obviously, we knew that when Brent Pry left, some of the relationships he had done a great job forging, rather, in the class of 2023 and beyond I don't think, it would be a reset in some respects. Not a total reset, because as we've always discussed, Penn State recruits from a staff-wide perspective, and it's not just one guy who's recruiting a prospect at any given time. However, I think it's hard for me to believe that a player could have the same level of relationship with every guy on the staff or girl on the staff that he talks to. And because of that, you're going to have instances where guys are much further along with this position coach or that recruiting coordinator or whatever compared to others. And obviously Pry was a linebacker coach here. So we'll see. But you're right. The visits certainly, I think, tell a tale here that this one is far from locked down by any stretch of the imagination.
One other thing I'll add, too, is, T. Frank just did a good story on looking at Manny Diaz and how much he uses safeties kind of compared to linebackers. Manny's uses many more outside linebackers, Wills and Sams, with kind of that 11th defender, which, Penn State uses, I think is the star position, I want to say.
Sure. That's what it was. Who knows what it is now, but yes.
Yeah, I haven't heard about too much over last year, but my point is just like he doesn't use a mic nearly as much as what we've seen. Now, Brent Pry didn't use a mic all the time either, but just from reading T. Frank, it seems like the Manny Diaz is going to use one even less. So I'll just be curious to see how that impacts really this whole recruitment, and Jordan Hall as well. The IMG Academy linebacker is very much still in the mix as well. So just kind of, I think Jordan Hall just went to Michigan State recently, maybe this past weekend. Yeah. So Penn State's very firmly in the mix there too. But Josiah, Pichotti, Jordan Hall, they feel like the 3 guys in the mix for a mic. And I think one of them is going to come off the board for Penn State here soon, and Trotter, and probably end up at West Virginia.
All right. Well, keep an eye on BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for all the latest intel on linebacker recruiting and so much more. You can join us for just $1 for 1 year of access at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Also, speaking of T. Frank, it's not just a recruiting show here with Ryan and I that is found on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/BlueWhiteIllustrated and wherever you get your audio podcast. T. Frank's daily podcast, film breakdowns, and more are available at youtube.com/BlueWhiteIllustrated. Ryan, let's dive into the transfer portal here quick. I don't think we have a ton to really share about this other than the fact that it happened and Penn State could find itself in the mix. So let's dive into this. Akeem, oh boy. Maisador, does that sound right? Yeah, okay.
Mesidor.
Yep. He was
Mesidor.
Mesidor. Yep. Okay. He was on campus last weekend, something you were able to report on Friday. A guy who's going to get globs of interest in the transfer portal, and there's a whole bunch of schools that are going to be hoping to host him after offering him. Penn State, of course, was able to do that earlier than anyone, but it doesn't necessarily mean they will win out in the end. What do we know at this point? I know it's not, it's fairly recent since he last visited.
Yeah. It's not like we're talking to him either. The talk has been for a while now that Miami is very much in play and that NIL has a lot to do with it. Do I know that for sure? I don't. I think if you just read West Virginia message boards, if you even read Miami message boards, and then also, there are just people in the industry that are talking about it as well. There's been a lot of talk about that. Now, with that said, I've also had people mention to me that because of all that talk, it's making the move to Miami maybe a little harder than originally thought. So, look, Penn State got him on campus. I believe he was here Friday and Saturday. I don't have that 100% confirmed, but I believe he was here more than just one day. I don't believe it was an official visit, though. I have to triple check on that, though. But yeah, I mean, Penn State's getting him on campus. Sounds like USC is very interested. I believe Auburn just offered him a couple days ago. So Auburn's going to make a push there. He's kind of a tweener, not really a true edge, at 6'3", 250, but man, he was productive, and nobody can argue that, from his time at West Virginia. I think it was 38 tackles, 4.5 sacks this past year, and then 32 tackles, 5 sacks, earning second team All Big Ten honors as a freshman. I think he was a freshman All-American too, by a few outlets. So lot to like. I will say that Mesidor, originally from Canada, was at Penn State before. He did camp at Penn State when he was younger. Of course, didn't pick up an offer, but he has connections to guys like Jesse Laquetta, Christian Veilleux, Jonathan Sutherland. They were all part of that Gridiron Academy, which always brings players down from Canada over the years. So whether that plays a factor or not, I don't really think it would. But it was good for Penn State to get him on campus. But aside from that, there's not a whole lot more I can really share.
Yeah, I believe there's a former staff member from West Virginia at Miami right now. I think he was at West Virginia and then went to Georgia for a year and is now at Miami. I'm not 100% certain on that. I'm pretty sure, though. So that's another thing to keep in mind as well. It's amazing with the transfer portal, though, how many old connections you can find that maybe don't seem relevant at the time. Like even this Penn State camp, for example, maybe didn't seem relevant at the time when he was on campus. Now could be obviously a part of the relationship building process that Penn State it certainly used to host him to get him to come to campus. We'll see where it goes from there. But yeah, past relationships, past camps, NIL, current opportunities. I mean, the list kind of just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, I mean, there are other guys we know they're working on in there, but until I, hear more from people that I trust, as far as like who's genuinely, like, of course, they're following guys on Twitter and stuff like that. But right now, I mean, it's kind of quiet. Now, of course, spring ball is going to end here very soon, and I would expect to see that. Late April, early May, names to really pick up. But of course, you have to be in the transfer portal by the end of May, I believe it is. I think it's May 31st. You have to be in the portal if you want to play the upcoming season. So I would still be surprised if Penn State didn't add anybody. I certainly think 2 guys would surprise me, I guess you'd say, as far as just Hunter and Mitchell Tinsley. But be interesting to see. They certainly would like some defensive ends and maybe a linebacker as well.
I think a lot of Penn State fans would like that too, but they're easier found or easier discussed rather and said to be interested in all that than actually interested and found. So we'll see. But you're right. Spring practice, Penn State actually, I was doing a look for the Saturday 6-pack we had over at Blue White Illustrated last weekend, and Penn State's definitely one of the later major schools to wrap things up, but there's still some schools that still play spring games after Penn State will, even though a lot of schools are doing it the weekend before this coming weekend. I guess it is the 9th or the 16th. Penn State, and I'm sorry, they're on the 23rd this year, their blue-white game. So at any rate, there are a couple schools that come after them that last weekend of April. But for the most part, I think you're going to start seeing more and more guys as spring wraps up start to hit the portal, start trying to figure out where they want to go next. So it will get busy, and there will, of course, be high school guys on campus as well, which takes us to the final topic we have for this week's edition of the BWI Daily Recruiting Show. Ryan, we're going to wrap up the weekend that was and look ahead. Micaiah White was on campus. Penn State sent out a new offer. Per the usual, I would let you pick where you would like to start here, but certainly a productive weekend on the high school recruiting front for Penn State as well.
Well, 2023, I mean, Marquise Williams was here. That was notable. The Bishop McDevitt running back.
Yep.
I've talked about a long time, and I think he's a very good player. But size is just the one thing that I think people are concerned about. I will say that he is up about 10 pounds from last time. I think in the fall he was around 165. He's up to around 175 now, so that's a great sign. And just be curious to see if he moves up Penn State's board much. Of course, London Montgomery, Trayon Webb, Mark Fletcher, a few other guys I think are really the ones they're pushing hard for. But the fact that they're bringing him back, just maybe something to keep an eye on here down the road if they miss out on some top guys. They also hosted Damon Walters. He's a 2023 safety prospect. good player. I'd like to catch up with him still. Right now, he's ranked number 376 in the On3 consensus. But I mean, the real talent that was here this past weekend really is 2025. I mean, Mekhi White's a 2024 player who, by the way, we have listed at wide receiver, but I think Penn State likes him as a linebacker. So that's something to keep an eye on. That's something someone mentioned to me actually just right before we were getting on the show here. 6'2", 180 is what we have him listed at. I think he was a little bit bigger than that, but I'll have to. I think I'm trying to remember what was his. I think he was up to I think 6'2", 180 is right. Anyway, let's go to 2025 though, man. That's where the real talent was this past weekend. I wrote a story on Amari Gaines today. I think he's going to be a serious cornerback out of New Jersey. Of course, he's still a freshman, but man, already 6'1", 165. I know 165 is kind of small, of course, but again, he's a freshman. But already at 6'1", there's a lot of length there to like. I think Penn State likes him a lot. Kamar Archie was here from the Hun School. I mean, I've talked about him. I think he's going to be a 5-star player. John Forster also got a Penn State offer. He's a good-looking running back from St. Joseph's Prep. So all three of those guys are New Jersey prospects. So this past weekend was really about a good group of youth players. Now, do you want to get into? I mean, we have a couple guys for this upcoming weekend too. If you want to get into it, I think Mason Robinson. Well, first off, today is Tuesday, April 5th. I'm expecting Jameel Lyons to be back here tomorrow, which of course will be April 6th. That's a big one for Penn State. I've already put in RPM for Jameel. I put it in right after he announced his top 5. So it was probably about 9-10 days ago. I feel good about that one. I think West Virginia will prove to be Penn State's top competitor, although he does need to get to Pitt, and I do think he'll get to Pitt soon. But I mean, if you just read the story I wrote and just kind of read what he says about the other full schools, and then read what he said about Penn State, I mean, it was the level of detail. I mean, sometimes I try not to read too much into quotes, but that was one of those situations where just the level of detail was like, okay, it's clear here to me that Penn State's a top school there. But we're also expecting the American Heritage guys to be here this upcoming weekend. Of course, Brandon Innes is one of the best players in the country at wide receiver. I think he's going to be here Friday. Santana Fleming's supposed to be here. I believe Damon Fagan's coming up. So I still have to get a feel for how many American Heritage guys are coming. But it's supposed to be a pretty good group. And then there'll be some young guys, too, making the trip. I believe Mason Robinson. Is Mason Robinson the 9th? Yeah, I believe Mason will be here the 9th as well. So, I've talked about Mason a ton. He's another guy I have an RPM prediction in for. So it's going to be a good group. Emilio Agar, too, 2024 guy. How could I forget him? He's going to be up this weekend. So lots of talented names to keep an eye on. I think Ryan Montgomery, too, the 2025 quarterback, is planning to make his way up here to watch spring practice on Friday. So obviously, it's only Tuesday right now. Let's see how the list shapes out. But from the outside looking in and just some of the names we have confirmed right now, this is looking like the best weekend we've had so far for spring recruiting.
Yeah, and it's good, too, that it has been a good, it's good to note, too, I guess is a better way of putting it, that it's been a good spring so far for Penn State. But certainly this is looking like maybe the best group they've had up here. And then the blue-white game will be not too far from now, and that'll be power-packed as well. So we're going to start seeing, I think, business really start picking up for Penn State on that front.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, even April 16th, I believe, I'm trying to think who, I thought I had one big name for April 16th. Oh, Fachati, of course. I just talked about him a couple seconds ago. Yeah, so it's, shaping up to be, I think this is going to be a good weekend. I think the following weekend will be good. And then, blue-white will be, of course, the mega weekend. I am actually planning to go to a 7-on-7 tournament on Saturday, too. The PA Swag 7-on-7 hosted by Ed O'Brien, Coach Cleasy. He's over at 24/7, but we've been friends for a long time. So I believe the Evolve group from Pittsburgh, so Rodney Gallagher, Quentin Martin, a bunch of those guys. Tamir Robinson, he's not playing right now because he's injured, but he should be out there. So looking forward to seeing some of those guys as well on, I think Saturday or Sunday. With the Masters being Sunday, I feel like I got to go Saturday, right? So I can catch the final round of the Masters on Sunday. But planning to make a trip out to Philly to see those guys, and looking forward to seeing what other talent's there as well.
No question about it. Well, stay tuned for all that and more at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. That's going to put a wrap on this edition of the BWI Daily Recruiting Show. For Ryan Snyder, Thomas Frank Carr, you got one more thing to add there, Ryan?
No, I'm sorry. I was just pulling something up.
Good, because T. Frank hit the music, so we got to roll. We will catch you next week. Find everything at youtube.com/BlueWhiteIllustrated, wherever you get your podcast, or at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. For Ryan and myself and T. Frank, we will catch you next week on the BWI Daily Recruiting Show.